the Knights Templar were supposed to be gone. Disbanded in 1307 by a French king who feared their wealth, and a pope who needed his favor, hunted across Europe, their leaders burned at the stake, their assets seized, their order officially erased from the face of the earth. That is what the history books say. That is what the official record insists. But the official record has always had a problem, and that problem has a name and a location and a depth that nobody has ever been able to fully measure. The problem is Oak Island, because for decades the evidence has been accumulating quietly and stubbornly in the soil and the stone, and the water-logged tunnels of a small island off the coast of Nova Scotia, pointing toward a conclusion so extraordinary that serious people have been reluctant to say it out loud, that the Templars did not simply vanish, that they came here, to the edge of the known world, with their treasure and their secrets, and their extraordinary engineering capability, and they built something so permanent and so deliberately hidden that it has resisted every attempt at discovery for over 2 centuries. And now the team has found something in that soil that is 700 years old and bears the unmistakable marks of the people who built it. The history books may need to be rewritten, and it starts right now. Welcome back, everyone. Drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from. This community spans the whole world, and that never gets old. And tonight, this community is not just watching a treasure hunt. Tonight, it is watching history bend under the weight of physical evidence that nobody who studies this island has ever been able to fully explain away. Evidence that is older than the founding of every nation currently drawing maps of this part of the world. Evidence that points directly at one of the most powerful and secretive organizations in the history of Western civilization. What the team has found on Oak Island is not a fragment or a hint or one of the tantalizing near misses that this island has been producing for generations of searchers. It is 700-year-old proof, physical and documented and impossible to dismiss, that the Knights Templar were here, that they built the money pit, and that whatever they buried inside it was significant enough to justify an engineering operation of a scale and sophistication that the modern world is still struggling to fully understand. This is the episode that changes everything. Stay with it. To understand what this discovery actually means, you have to understand who the Knights Templar really were. Not the romanticized version that appears in novels and films, but the real organization, the one that existed in the physical world and left physical traces wherever it operated. Founded in 1119 to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem, the Templars grew within a generation into something far larger and far more complex than a military order. They became the first international banking system in history, moving wealth across borders through a network of preceptories that stretched from the Holy Land to Scotland. They developed engineering techniques that were centuries ahead of their contemporaries, building fortifications and tunnels and hydraulic systems of a sophistication that still draws admiration from modern engineers. They accumulated wealth on a scale that made kings nervous and eventually made a king act, and when Philip IV of France moved against them in October of 1307, he did so with the speed and secrecy of a man who understood that if the Templars had any warning, they would move their assets beyond his reach before he could touch them. The question that historians have never satisfactorily answered is whether they did exactly that. Whether the inner circle of the order, knowing what was coming, had already arranged for the most significant portion of their treasure to be moved somewhere that no French king and no pope would ever think to look. Somewhere like the edge of the known world. Somewhere like a small island off the coast of a continent that Europe had not yet officially acknowledged existed. The evidence that this is exactly what happened has been building on Oak Island for years. And what the team found in this episode is the most direct and the most datable piece of that evidence yet. The artifact recovered from the Oak Island dig site has been analyzed, and the analysis is not ambiguous. The dating places it firmly in the late 13th or early 14th century, the precise window in which the Templar order was operating at full capacity and then suddenly, violently ceased to exist in its official form. The craftsmanship is consistent with European medieval metalwork of the period, and the symbolism on the object, the specific iconography worked into its surface, connects directly to the Templar tradition in a way that coincidence cannot account for. This is not a loose coin that might have arrived here through any number of routes. This is not a fragment of material that could be explained by early European fishing expeditions or the occasional undocumented transatlantic crossing. This is an object that was made by someone working within a specific tradition, brought to this specific location with specific intent, and buried or placed in circumstances that speak to the same organizational discipline and engineering sophistication that characterizes everything else about the Oak Island construction. The team's reaction when the analysis came back was exactly what you would expect from people who have spent years building toward this conclusion and have just watched the evidence cross the threshold from compelling to undeniable. There was no celebration in the loud sense. There was the quiet, serious acknowledgement of people who understand that what they are holding changes the terms of everything that comes next. Because if the Templars built the money pit, and the dating of this artifact says they did, then the question of what is at the bottom of it stops being a matter of speculation and becomes a matter of organizational history. The Templars did not bury things randomly. They were bankers and engineers and keepers of institutional knowledge accumulated over nearly 2 centuries of operating at the center of the medieval world. What they hid with purpose, and what they hid with this level of engineering sophistication was not hidden casually. The money pit itself has always been the most eloquent piece of evidence in this argument, and it is worth sitting with what it actually represents as an engineering achievement. The original discoverers in 1795 found a shaft that had been deliberately excavated and then refilled, with oak log platforms placed at regular intervals going down into the earth in a pattern that served no natural purpose. Subsequent excavations revealed flood tunnels, engineered channels that connected the pit to the ocean at a specific depth and would activate automatically if anyone attempted to dig below a certain point, flooding the excavation and defeating the effort. The system worked for over 2 centuries. It defeated every attempt at retrieval until modern pumping technology made it possible to at least partially manage the water. The engineering required to design and build that flood system is not simple. It requires knowledge of hydrology, of excavation technique, of materials and their behavior over long periods of time in changing conditions. It requires the kind of institutional knowledge that does not exist in a small group of opportunistic treasure hunters working without backing or expertise. It requires an organization with real resources, real technical capability, and a very clear understanding of what they were protecting and how long they needed it protected. The Templars had all of those things. They had the engineering knowledge from decades of building in the Holy Land and across Europe. They had the organizational capacity to mobilize the labor and materials required for an operation of this scale. They had the motivation, because what they were protecting in the years around 1307 was not just wealth but the accumulated treasure and documentation of an order that knew it was about to be destroyed and needed to ensure that what it had built and what it knew would survive. And they had the maritime capability. The Templar fleet, based at the port of La Rochelle on the Atlantic coast of France, vanished from the historical record in October of 1307. The same month, Philip IV moved against the order. 18 ships, loaded with whatever the Templars chose to load them with, sailed out of La Rochelle and were never officially accounted for again. The most persistent theory about where they went leads, through a chain of evidence that this island keeps adding to, directly to the coast of Nova Scotia. The connection to Scotland matters here, and it is worth tracing, because it is not a speculative leap. It is a documented historical pathway. When the Templars were suppressed across Europe, Scotland was one of the few places where the suppression was not effectively enforced. Robert the Bruce had been excommunicated and had no particular reason to comply with papal directives. and there is documented evidence of Templar presence in Scotland in the years following 1307. The St. Clair family, later Sinclair, was deeply connected to the Templar network and to the Scottish Church, and it is the Sinclair family that subsequent research has linked most directly to early transatlantic exploration, including the voyage of Henry Sinclair to the coast of North America in 1398, nearly a century before Columbus. If Sinclair reached Nova Scotia, and the evidence that he did is more substantial than mainstream history has generally acknowledged, then the pathway from the Templar suppression of 1307 to the construction of something on Oak Island runs through Scotland and through the Sinclair family and lands on this island with a coherence that is difficult to dismiss once you have followed all of its threads. The artifact recovered by the team this season fits into this pathway. Its dating, its craftsmanship, its iconography, all place it within this specific historical network. It did not arrive here by accident, and it did not arrive here through any of the mundane explanations that skeptics have offered for previous Oak Island discoveries. It arrived here because someone brought it here, and the organization most likely to have brought it here, given everything else the island has produced, is the one whose engineering fingerprints are all over the money pit itself. What the team is now confronting is the full weight of what confirmation actually means. For years, the Templar theory has been the most compelling explanation for Oak Island, but it has remained a theory, supported by circumstantial evidence and historical inference, and the kind of reasoning that serious researchers find persuasive but that falls short of the physical proof that changes the conversation permanently. This artifact is that proof. Dated, analyzed, documented, and sitting in the evidentiary record of the most extensively studied treasure site in North America. The implications run in multiple directions simultaneously. If the Templars built the money pit, then what is inside it is not simply treasure in the conventional sense. It may be the institutional archive of an order that spent nearly 2 centuries at the center of medieval European power. It may be documentation that rewrites the history of the period in ways that go far beyond the story of a single hidden fortune. It may be objects of historical and religious significance that the order accumulated during its time in the Holy Land, and that it protected with its most sophisticated engineering, precisely because it understood their extraordinary importance. The team understands all of this. You can see it in the way they move, and the way they speak, and the way the discovery has changed the atmosphere of the entire operation. This is not the excitement of people who think they are close to finding buried gold. This is the gravity of people who understand that what they are digging toward may be one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in the history of this continent. The island is not making it easy, and it never has. The water is still a factor, and the depth is still a challenge, and the engineering that defeated every previous attempt at retrieval is still functioning after 7 centuries, with a reliability that is itself a testament to the people who built it. The flood tunnels still flood. The ground still shifts. The conditions that make Oak Island one of the most technically demanding excavation sites on Earth have not changed simply because the evidence of who built it has become undeniable. But the team has tools and knowledge and technology that no previous generation of searchers had access to, and they have something else as well. They have the confirmation that what they are looking for is real, not theoretically real, not historically plausible, not the kind of real that requires you to squint at the evidence and be generous in your interpretation. Physically, datably, documentably real. 700-year-old proof found on a small island off the coast of Nova Scotia, on a dig that has been called everything from visionary to obsessive to foolish by people who were not there and did not see what the ground keeps giving up. The chains are on the equipment, and the team is going back down, and the island is doing what it always does, which is resist with everything it has, while simultaneously making it impossible to walk away. Somewhere below the flooded tunnels and the engineered obstacles and the 7 centuries of deliberate concealment, The thing the Templars hid is waiting. It has waited through the fall of the order that buried it, and the rise and fall of the empires that came after, and the 230 years of searching that never quite reached it. It has waited with the patience of something that was built to wait, protected by engineering so sophisticated that the modern world needed generations just to understand what it was dealing with. The team is closer than anyone has ever been. The evidence is stronger than it has ever been. And the artifact sitting in the documentary record of this excavation, 700 years old and bearing the marks of the people who built this place, is the confirmation that every person who ever believed in this search always knew was down there somewhere. The Knights Templar built the money pit. The proof is in the ground, and what they buried inside it is about to be found. What comes next, you do not want to miss.